Marlowe Thorne stood in the ruins of what used to be her life, a widow at 32, mother to 2 hungry children, and holder of a prayer no one seemed to hear. The foreclosure notice was taped to her door. The pantry was empty. The heat had been shut off 3 days ago. Her husband, a firefighter, had died saving strangers, and the insurance company found a loophole. Now, in the cold December shadows of a forgotten American town, Marlowe whispered her last hope into the night air, not knowing that across the county line a man called Iron Callahan heard it. Garrett. Iron Callahan wasn't a man who believed in divine intervention. He believed in steel, loyalty, and the rumble of 113 Harley-Davidson engines rolling as one. He'd seen too much blood, lost too many brothers, and learned long ago that the world didn't reward the righteous. It crushed them. But when a nurse at the Veterans Hospital mentioned a widow who'd once held his dying friend's hand through the worst night of the war, something ancient stirred in Iron's chest. A debt, a promise made in morphine haze and mud, a name he'd carried for 18 years. By dawn, 113, Hell's Angels stood outside Marlowe's crumbling house, engines idling, leather creaking, faces carved by wind and war. They didn't come with words. They came with groceries, firewood, tools, and the kind of silent loyalty that doesn't ask permission. What began as a single act of repayment became something far greater, a battle against a corrupt landlord, a town's buried shame, and the question of what family truly means when blood fails you. This is the story of a prayer answered not by angels in white, but by outlaws in black leather. A story of promises kept across decades, of justice delivered on 2 wheels, and of a widow who learned that sometimes salvation roars. The foreclosure notice hung crooked on the door, its red letters bleeding in the December rain. Marlowe Thorne didn't take it down. She just stared at it through the kitchen window, her fingers wrapped around a coffee mug filled with hot water. The last tea bag had been used 3 days ago. Behind her, in the cold living room where the heat had been shut off 72 hours earlier, her children slept under every blanket she owned. Sienna was 9. Rory was 6. They hadn't asked about dinner. They'd stopped asking 2 weeks ago. If you believe a mother's desperation can be heard across the miles, keep listening, because this is the night someone finally answered. The house smelled like mildew and defeat. The wallpaper her husband had chosen, pale blue with white clouds because he said their home should feel like the sky, was peeling at the corners. The mortgage was 3 months overdue. The insurance company had found their loophole, a technicality in the paperwork, a missed signature, a legal door slammed shut. Duncan Thorne had died pulling 2 children from a burning building. The city called him a hero. The insurance company called him uninsured. Marlowe pressed her forehead against the cold glass. Outside, the street was empty. No cars, no neighbors. This part of town had been dying for years. Factories closed, businesses boarded up, families gone. She was the last one left on Ashland Drive, clinging to a house she couldn't afford in a neighborhood the world had forgotten. She closed her eyes, and she prayed. Not to God. She'd tried that. Not to the church that had offered sympathy but no solutions. She prayed to the universe, to chance, to whatever force listened when mothers ran out of options. She prayed the way drowning people pray, with the kind of desperation that has no words, only raw need. "If anyone can hear me," she whispered, "I'm out of time." The rain answered. Nothing else. She didn't hear the engines until they were already close. At first, it was just a low rumble, distant thunder rolling through the wet streets. Then it grew louder, closer. The sound of multiple motorcycles moving in formation, their exhaust notes harmonizing into something that shook the walls. Marlowe lifted her head. Through the rain-streaked window, she saw the headlights first, dozens of them cutting through the December darkness like searchlights. Then the bikes themselves emerged from the mist, rolling slowly down Ashland Drive in 2 perfect columns. Harleys, All of them. Dozens, maybe more. They stopped in front of her house. The engines idled, a mechanical growl that vibrated through the floorboards. Marlowe's breath caught. She stepped back from the window, heart hammering. This didn't make sense. This part of town didn't get visitors. It certainly didn't get convoys of motorcycle riders at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night. The lead rider dismounted. He was a big man, barrel-chested and broad-shouldered, wearing a leather vest covered in patches. His beard was iron grey. His eyes, when he looked up at the house, were the colour of winter storms. He walked to the door, knocked twice. Heavy, deliberate knocks that echoed through the empty house. Marlowe didn't move. Fear and confusion warred in her chest. The man knocked again. "Mrs. Thorne?" His voice was gravelly, worn smooth by years of shouting over engines. "My name is Garrett Callahan. People call me Iron. I'm here because your husband saved my brother's life 18 years ago. And I'm here to tell you that you're not alone anymore." Marlowe's hand trembled as she reached for the door. Behind Iron Callahan, 112 other riders sat on their bikes, silent and still in the rain. Waiting. Ready. The door opened. Iron Callahan hadn't thought about Corporal Duncan Thorne in 5 years. Not because he'd forgotten. You don't forget the man who holds your brother's hand through the worst night of his life. But because some memories are too sharp to touch regularly. But 3 days ago, during his monthly visit to the VA hospital in Grantsville, a nurse named Petra had mentioned a name. A widow, a firefighter's wife living in Ashland Heights, the forgotten corner of the county where Hope went to die. The woman who'd volunteered at the hospital years ago, who'd sat with dying soldiers when their families couldn't, who'd been there the night Danny Callahan finally stopped screaming. "She's in trouble," Petra had said, her voice low. "Foreclosure, no food. 2 kids. The system chewed her up and spit her out. Her husband died a hero, and she's about to lose everything." Iron had asked one question. "What's her name?" Marlowe Thorne. The name hit him like a fist to the chest. Duncan Thorne. The medic who'd crawled through enemy fire in Kandahar to reach Danny when everyone else said it was suicide. The man who'd held Danny's shattered hand and talked him through 14 hours of hell until the medevac arrived. Iron had been pinned down 2 clicks away, unable to reach his little brother, listening to the radio chatter and praying to gods he didn't believe in. When they finally reunited stateside, Danny was missing 3 fingers and most of his sanity. But he was alive. Iron had asked Duncan what he could ever do to repay him. Duncan had smiled. That easy. Genuine smile that some men carry even in war zones, and said, "Take care of your people, brother. That's all any of us can do." Now Duncan was dead, and his widow was drowning. Iron made 2 phone calls that night. The first was to Marcus Wrench Delgado, the club's road captain. The second was to every chapter of the Hells Angels within 200 miles. By dawn, 113 riders had assembled in the parking lot of Lucky's Diner, their bikes gleaming in the cold morning light. They came from 3 states. They came without hesitation, because when Iron Callahan called, you answered. "We're not here to play savior," Iron told them, his voice cutting through the rumble of idling engines. "We're here to pay a debt. Duncan Thorne saved one of our own when no one else would. His widow and kids are about to lose their home. We're going to make sure that doesn't happen." No one questioned it. No one asked for details. The club had rules, codes, and hierarchies, but above all of that was something simpler: loyalty. When a brother called, you rode. When a debt was owed, you paid it. They'd spent the past 3 days preparing. Wrench had contacted a lawyer who specialized in predatory lending cases. A rider named Sonia, who owned a construction company, had assembled a crew to assess the house's structural damage. Another member, a former social worker named Teresa, had quietly investigated the foreclosure and found irregularities. The landlord, a man named Virgil Crenshaw, had been buying up distressed properties in Ashland Heights for years, using legal loopholes and aggressive tactics to force out residents and flip the land to developers. Marlowe's case wasn't an exception. It was a pattern, but that was a fight for later. Tonight, they had a simpler mission: show Marlowe Thorne that she wasn't forgotten. When Marlowe opened the door, Ian saw the exhaustion etched into her face. She was thin, too thin, with dark circles under her eyes and the kind of weariness that comes from fighting alone for too long. Her hands shook slightly as she gripped the doorframe. "Mrs. Thorne," Ian said gently, "your husband once told me that all any of us can do is take care of our people. You're our people now, and we're here to help." Marlowe stared at him, at the 112 riders behind him, at the trucks pulling up with supplies. Her lips trembled. "I don't understand," she whispered. "You will," Ian said. "Let us in." Marlowe stepped aside, and the night transformed. Within 20 minutes, her house was no longer silent. It was filled with the organized chaos of people who knew how to work without wasting words. Riders carried in boxes of groceries, real food, not canned donations or charity handouts, but fresh vegetables, meat, bread, milk. A woman with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes introduced herself as Teresa and immediately began organizing the pantry. "Your furnace is shot," a lean man with scarred knuckles announced. He'd gone straight to the basement without asking permission. "But I can have a temporary heater running in 30 minutes. We'll fix the furnace proper tomorrow." "Who are you people?" Marlowe's voice cracked. Ian stood in her kitchen, watching his crew move with practiced efficiency. "We're the family your husband earned 18 years ago, and we pay our debts." Sienna and Rory had woken up, drawn by the noise. They stood at the top of the stairs, wide-eyed and silent, watching strangers fill their home with warmth and purpose. A rider named Juno, a grandmother of 5 who rode a candy apple red soft ale, noticed them first. "You two must be starving," she said, her voice gentle. "How about I make you the best grilled cheese sandwiches you've ever had?" Rory, the younger one, nodded slowly. Sienna, more cautious, looked at her mother. Marlowe's eyes filled with tears. She nodded. Within the hour, the house felt like a home again. The temporary heater roared to life, pushing warm air through the vents. The children sat at the kitchen table eating sandwiches and tomato soup, their eyes bright for the first time in weeks. Teresa had quietly paid the electric bill online, using club funds. Wrench was on the phone with the lawyer, discussing foreclosure law in sharp, clipped sentences. Ian sat across from Marlowe at the dining room table, a cup of coffee between them. "Duncan never mentioned you," Marlowe said quietly. "He talked about the war sometimes, not often, but he never mentioned anyone named Ion." "We met once," Ion said. "In Kandahar, 2007, he saved my brother's life. Crawled through hell to reach him when everyone else said it was suicide. I asked him what I could do to repay him. He said to take care of my people. So I did. And now you're my people." "Why now?" Marlowe's voice was barely a whisper. "Why did you come tonight?" "Because a nurse at the VA told me you were out of time," Ian said simply. "And I don't break promises, even ones I made to ghosts." Marlowe's tears came then, silent and steady. She didn't try to hide them. She just sat there, letting 18 months of grief and terror finally crack open. Ian didn't offer platitudes. He just waited. That was the thing about people who'd seen real darkness. They understood that some pain couldn't be fixed with words. You just had to sit with it until it passed. And now, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. Virgil Crenshaw arrived at 7:43 a.m., driving a black Cadillac that looked too expensive for the neighborhood he was systematically dismantling. He didn't expect to find 20 motorcycles parked in front of Marlowe Thorne's house. He certainly didn't expect to see Ian Callahan leaning against the porch railing, arms crossed, watching him with the kind of patience that predators use before they strike. Crenshaw parked at the curb and got out slowly, his leather briefcase gleaming in the morning sun. He was a thin man, 50s, with silver hair and the kind of smile that estate agents practiced in mirrors. He'd made his fortune buying distressed properties from desperate families, then flipping them to developers once the neighborhood was cleared. Ashland Heights was his masterpiece. 12 families displaced in 3 years, one more, and the entire block would be his. "Mrs. Thorne," he called out, ignoring the riders entirely. "I'm here for the final walkthrough. As stated in the foreclosure notice, you have until noon to vacate the premises." Marlowe appeared in the doorway, Ian beside her. Her face was calm now, rested. She'd slept 6 hours for the first time in months. "Mr. Crenshaw," she said evenly, "I'm not leaving." Crenshaw's smile didn't falter. "I'm afraid that's not your decision anymore. The property has been legally foreclosed. I have the paperwork, forged paperwork." A new voice cut through his speech. A woman in a grey suit stepped out of a parked sedan, carrying her own briefcase. Her name was Diana Reeves, and she was the lawyer Wrench had called. She specialized in predatory lending cases, and she'd spent the past 3 days tearing apart Crenshaw's empire. "I've reviewed your foreclosure filing," Diana said, walking up the driveway with the confidence of someone holding all the cards. "It's fraudulent. You backdated the final notice. You never provided the required 30-day extension, and you've been charging illegal late fees for 6 months. Mrs. Thorne's foreclosure is null and void." Crenshaw's smile finally cracked. "That's absurd. I have every legal right—" "You have the right to remain silent," Diana interrupted, "because I've already filed a complaint with the State Attorney General's office. They're very interested in your acquisition methods across Ashland Heights. 12 families, Mr. Crenshaw. 12 foreclosures in 3 years, all with the same pattern of irregularities." The morning air grew very still. Crenshaw looked at the riders, at Diana, at Marlowe standing on her porch with her children behind her. He was a predator who'd suddenly found himself surrounded by bigger predators. "This is harassment," he said, his voice rising. "I'll call the police." "Please do," Ian said. Speaking for the first time, his voice was calm, almost friendly. "I'm sure they'll be fascinated by the paperwork discrepancies Ms. Reeves has documented, and by the witness statements from 11 other families you evicted using the same tactics." Crenshaw's face went pale. He glanced at his Cadillac, calculating distances and escape routes. "Or," Diana said, "you can sign the withdrawal of foreclosure I have right here. You leave Mrs. Thorne alone. You drop all claims to this property, and in exchange we'll consider not pursuing criminal charges." "Criminal charges?" Crenshaw's voice cracked. "Fraud, falsification of legal documents, and conspiracy to commit real estate fraud. I have enough evidence to bury you, Mr. Crenshaw. The only question is whether you're smart enough to walk away while you still can." The silence stretched. A crow called from a nearby telephone pole. The motorcycle engines were quiet, but the threat was obvious. 113 witnesses standing ready to testify. Crenshaw signed the papers. His hand shook as he wrote his name. He didn't say another word. He just got in his Cadillac and drove away, leaving a trail of gravel dust and broken threats behind him. Marlowe stood on her porch, watching him disappear. Her children pressed against her sides. The house was hers. The threat was gone. Ian walked over to her. "It's not over," he said quietly. "Men like that don't quit. He'll come back different, harder, but we'll be ready." Marlowe looked at him. "Why are you doing this? You paid your debt. You could leave." Ian smiled, a rare expression on his weathered face. "Because your husband was right. All we can do is take care of our people. And you're our people now. By the third day, the entire town knew about the bikers in Ashland Heights. The local diner buzzed with rumors. Gas station attendants whispered theories. The police chief, a man named Walter Briggs, who'd been taking Crenshaw's money for years, started making phone calls. The comfortable corruption that had strangled Ashland Heights for a decade was suddenly uncomfortable. Iron knew this phase well. He'd seen it in a dozen towns across a dozen states, the moment when power structures realized they were being challenged, the moment before they struck back. He stood in Marlowe's kitchen on Thursday morning, drinking coffee with Wrench and Teresa, when the first patrol car pulled up outside. "Right on schedule," Wrench muttered. 2 officers got out. Young guys, mid-20s, trying to look authoritative. They walked to the door with the stiff posture of men following orders they didn't fully understand. Iron answered the door before they could knock. "Gentlemen," he said evenly, "something we can help you with?" The taller officer consulted a clipboard. "We've received complaints about noise violations and public disturbance, multiple motorcycles parked illegally, intimidation of local residents." "Interesting," Iron said. "Who filed the complaint?" The officer hesitated. "That's confidential." "Let me guess," Teresa said from behind Iron. "Virgil Crenshaw, or someone on his payroll." The officer's expression confirmed it before he could stop himself. Diana Reeves appeared from the living room, her phone already recording. "Officers, I'm attorney Diana Reeves. I'm representing Mrs. Thorne in an ongoing legal matter. Unless you have a warrant or probable cause, this is harassment." "Ma'am, we're just responding to a complaint, a fabricated complaint designed to intimidate my client and her associates," Diana interrupted. "Every motorcycle here is legally parked. No noise violations have occurred. And I have 17 witnesses who will testify that this is targeted harassment orchestrated by a man currently under investigation for real estate fraud." The officers exchanged glances. They were young enough to still believe in doing the right thing, old enough to recognize when they were being used. "Look," the shorter one said, lowering his voice, "we're just doing our job. Chief Briggs told us to come here and document violations." "Chief Briggs," Iron said carefully, "has been taking money from Crenshaw for 3 years. I have bank records, witnesses, and a federal investigator who's very interested in corruption in small-town law enforcement." The officers went pale. "You seem like good kids," Iron continued, his voice gentle. "You got caught in the middle of something ugly. My advice? Document that you found no violations, write it up clean, and don't let Briggs drag you down with him when this all comes out." The taller officer looked at his partner, then at Marlowe, who'd appeared in the doorway with Sienna and Rory behind her. "No violations observed," he said finally. "Have a good day, folks." They left. Iron watched them drive away. "That bought us maybe 48 hours, he said. "Briggs will escalate. Crenshaw will push harder. They'll come back with something bigger." "Let them," Marlowe said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. She stood in the doorway, her children at her sides, her spine straight for the first time in months. "This is my home. My husband gave his life protecting this town. I'm not running." Teresa smiled. "Good, because we weren't planning on letting you." The code inspector arrived on Friday morning with a clipboard, a camera, and enough violations already written to condemn the house before he'd even walked through the door. His name was Raymond Cross, and he'd been on Crenshaw's payroll for 2 years. His job was simple: find enough violations to declare the property uninhabitable. Once the house was condemned, Marlowe would have no choice but to leave. Crenshaw would buy it at auction for pennies. Another piece of his empire complete. Raymond expected an easy morning. He didn't expect to find 20 bikers sitting on the porch, drinking coffee and waiting for him. "Morning?" Iron said pleasantly. "You must be the inspector." Raymond's confidence wavered. I'm here to conduct a safety inspection, building code compliance. Of course, Diana Reeves said, stepping forward with her own clipboard. I'll be accompanying you throughout the inspection, recording everything, to ensure accuracy. Raymond's jaw tightened. That's not necessary. Oh, it absolutely is, Diana said, smiling, especially since this property has been unfairly targeted as part of a systematic scheme to displace residents. I'm sure you'll want everything documented properly. The inspection took 3 hours. Raymond tried. He documented loose floorboards, a leaking faucet, a crack in the foundation. He noted missing handrails and outdated electrical outlets. He built his case violation by violation, his pen scratching across the forms with bureaucratic precision. But for every violation he noted, Sonia's construction crew had a solution: the loose floorboard, already scheduled for repair this afternoon, the leaking faucet, being replaced tomorrow, the electrical outlets, updated to current code by an electrician who'd already pulled permits. By noon, Raymond's list of violations had been reduced to minor repairs that could be fixed within days. Not enough to condemn the house, not even close. This property requires significant work, Raymond said, his voice strained. I'm recommending a follow-up inspection in 30 days. Perfect, Diana said, and I'm recommending a full audit of your inspection history for the past 3 years, particularly your work in Ashland Heights. The state licensing board is very interested in inspectors who falsify reports for personal gain. Raymond went white. His hand trembled on the clipboard. You seem stressed, Ian observed. Maybe you should take a vacation, clear your head, think about who you really work for. Raymond left without another word. That evening, as the sun set over Ashland Heights, the riders gathered in Marlowe's backyard. Someone had brought a grill, someone else had brought guitars. The smell of cooking meat mixed with engine oil and leather, the scent of a different kind of family gathering. Sienna and Rory ran through the yard, chasing fireflies with a group of riders' kids who'd shown up uninvited and were now teaching them motorcycle maintenance. Marlowe sat on the back steps, watching her children laugh for the first time in months. Ian sat down beside her. You're smiling. I'd forgotten how, Marlowe admitted. She looked at him. You know they're not done. Crenshaw, Briggs, they'll keep coming. Probably, Ian agreed. But so will we, and eventually they'll figure out that we're more stubborn than they are corrupt. Why? Marlowe asked. Why does this matter so much to you? Ian was quiet for a long moment. Then, my brother Danny died last year. Pills. He never recovered from what happened in Kandahar. The nightmares, the pain, it ate him alive. But he had 18 years after that patrol. 18 years because your husband crawled through hell to save him. That's 18 Christmases, 18 birthdays, 18 years of watching sunsets and riding bikes and being with people who loved him. His voice cracked slightly. Duncan gave Danny 18 years. The least I can do is make sure Duncan's kids don't lose their home. Marlowe reached over and squeezed his hand. If this story has moved you, leave a like, because stories of real loyalty deserve to be heard. Sienna Thorne was 9 years old, and she remembered her father perfectly. She remembered the way he smelled, like wood smoke and safety. She remembered his laugh, deep and genuine. She remembered the last morning before the fire, when he'd made pancakes and drawn smiley faces with syrup, telling her that heroes weren't people who never felt afraid. They were people who helped others, even when they were terrified. She remembered the funeral, the flag, the silence. And she remembered the months after, when her mother stopped sleeping, stopped eating, stopped being anything except a woman drowning in paperwork and fear. So when the bikers came, Sienna watched them carefully. She was old enough to know that adults lied, that promises broke, that even good people disappeared, but these people kept showing up. Every day for a week they came, fixed things, brought groceries, Sat with her mother when the panic attacks hit. Juno taught her how to braid hair. Wrench showed Rory how engines worked. Teresa helped with homework without making it feel like charity. On the 8th night, Sienna found Iron sitting alone on the front porch, staring at the street. "Are you going to leave?" she asked. Iron looked at her, really looked at her, the way adults did when they were deciding whether to tell the truth. "Eventually," he said, "but not until your family is safe. And even after I leave, others will stay. We take care of our people." "Why?" Sienna asked. "We're not your people. You don't even know us." "Your dad saved my brother," Iron said. "That makes you family. In my world, family is earned, not born, and once you're in forever." Sienna sat down next to him. "Mom cries at night. She tries to be quiet, but I hear her. She's afraid you're all going to disappear like Dad did. That one day we'll wake up and you'll all be gone and everything will go back to being terrible." Iron's jaw tightened. "You know what courage is, Sienna? Helping people when you're scared. Your dad taught you well." Iron smiled slightly. "Courage is also trusting again after you've been hurt. Your mom is doing that right now, and that's braver than anything I've ever done." "Will you promise something?" Sienna asked. "Depends on the promise." "Promise you won't lie to us, even if the truth is hard. Dad always told the truth, even when it scared us." Iron extended his hand. "I promise, no lies, even when it's hard." They shook on it. Inside, Marlowe watched through the window, her hand pressed against the glass. She saw her daughter, her fierce, protective daughter, shake hands with a man wearing a leather vest covered in patches, and for the first time since Duncan died, she felt something shift in her chest. Hope. It felt dangerous and fragile and terrifying, but it felt real. Chief Walter Briggs made his move on Tuesday night. He came with 6 patrol cars, a county sheriff, and an arrest warrant for Iron Callahan. The charge, intimidation of a public official. The real reason, Crenshaw had paid him $15, $0 to make the problem disappear. Briggs expected resistance. He didn't expect to find half the town standing in Marlowe Thorne's front yard. The riders were there, of course, 113 Hells Angels standing in formation, engines idling, ready. But they weren't alone. Petra, the VA nurse, stood on the porch. Mrs. Chen from the Chinese restaurant was there, holding a sign that said, "Heroes help heroes." 3 teachers from the elementary school, 2 firefighters from Duncan's old station, a dozen veterans wearing their old unit patches. And standing front and center, holding her children's hands, was Marlowe Thorne. "Chief Briggs," she said, her voice carrying across the yard, "you're making a mistake." Briggs got out of his car, his hand resting on his service weapon. "Ma'am, I have an arrest warrant for Garrett Callahan. Obstruction of justice and intimidation. I need him to surrender peacefully." "Obstruction of what justice?" Diana Reeves stepped forward, holding up her phone. "The justice that allowed a corrupt landlord to steal homes, or the justice that ignored 12 families being systematically displaced? Because I have evidence of both, and I've sent it to the State Attorney General, the FBI, and 3 major news networks." Briggs's face went red. "You're interfering with police business?" "I'm documenting police corruption," Diana corrected. "And I have 17 witnesses who will testify that you've been taking bribes from Virgil Crenshaw for years, including bank records showing $47,000 in payments over 3 years. The silence was absolute. One of the younger officers stepped forward. "Chief, is that true?" "Of course not," Briggs snapped. "These people are criminals trying to—" "I was there," Petra said suddenly. 3 years ago, when you threatened Mrs. Rodriguez into leaving her home. You said if she didn't sign the papers, you'd have her son deported. He was a citizen, Chief, born in this country, but you threatened her anyway, and she left." "I saw it too," Mr. Chen said. "You did the same thing to the Hernandez family and the Johnsons." "And my family," said a woman in the back. "You told my father he'd lose his veterans' benefits if he didn't vacate. He had a Purple Heart, Chief, and you used his service against him." The officers behind Briggs were exchanging glances. The county sheriff was slowly backing toward his car. The arrest warrant was crumbling before it could even be executed. "You can arrest me," Iron said calmly, stepping forward. "But you'll do it in front of cameras, witnesses, and federal investigators. And when this goes to trial, every dirty secret you've buried is going to come out. Every bribe, every threat, every family you helped Crenshaw destroy." Briggs's hand trembled on his weapon. Or, Diana said, "You can resign. Tonight. Walk away with what's left of your pension and your freedom. Because if you push this, I will bury you so deep you'll never see daylight again." The moment stretched. Then Briggs turned and got back in his car. The other officers followed. They drove away slowly, their red and blue lights dark. The crowd erupted in cheers. Marlowe collapsed against Iron, her body shaking with relief. Sienna and Rory pressed against her sides, their arms wrapped around her waist. "It's over," Marlowe whispered. "Not yet," Iron said, "but we're close." 3 months later, Marlowe stood in front of her house, her home, and barely recognized it. The porch had been rebuilt, the roof was new, the walls were painted. The yard, once overgrown and dying, was now filled with flowers planted by Ryder's kids during weekend work parties. Inside, the house was warm, solid, and safe. But more than the house had changed. Ashland Heights was coming back to life. With Briggs gone and Crenshaw facing federal fraud charges, the displaced families were returning. The Rodriguezes bought back their home. The Hernandezes reopened their restaurant. The vacant lots were being filled again with people and laughter and hope. And in the center of it all was an unlikely coalition. Motorcycle riders, veterans, teachers, nurses, and families who'd learned that community wasn't about geography. It was about showing up when people needed you. The Hells Angels had become fixtures in town. Juno opened a literacy program at the library. Wrench taught auto mechanics at the high school. Teresa ran a legal aid clinic. Iron stayed, not permanently. He'd leave for weeks at a time, riding with his brothers, answering other calls. But he always came back, because this place had become something he'd never expected to find. Home. Today was special. The entire town had gathered for the dedication of Duncan Thorne Memorial Park, a small green space on the corner of Ashland Drive where families could gather. The Firefighters Union had donated the benches. The motorcycle club had built the playground. And in the center stood a plaque with Duncan's photograph and a simple inscription: "Heroes are people who help others even when they're afraid." Duncan Thorne, 1983-2024. Marlowe stood before the plaque, Sienna and Rory on either side of her. Iron stood slightly behind, his presence quiet and steady. "Dad would have liked this," Sienna said softly. "He would have been embarrassed," Marlowe said, smiling through tears. "Your father never wanted attention. He just wanted to help." "Then we'll help in his name," Rory said. "Like Iron does." Iron stepped forward, placing a hand on each child's shoulder. "Your dad made me a promise keeper, and you two are going to make this world better. That's his real legacy." Later, as the sun set and the crowd dispersed, Marlowe and Iron sat on the new porch swing, a gift from the club, watching the street come alive with families returning home. "I still don't understand why you stayed," Marlowe said. "You paid your debt. You could have left months ago." Iron was quiet for a long moment. Then, when Danny died, I thought I'd failed him. That all those years Duncan bought him weren't enough. But sitting here, watching your kids grow up safe, watching this community rebuild, I realized Danny's 18 years mattered. Every moment of them, and so does this. He gestured at the street, the houses, the families. "Your husband taught me that courage is helping others even when you're afraid. You taught me that courage is also trusting again after you've lost everything, and your kids are teaching me that legacy isn't about monuments. It's about showing up every day for the people who need you." Marlowe reached over and took his hand. They sat in silence as the streetlights flickered on, one by one, pushing back the darkness. A prayer had been answered that night 3 months ago, not by angels in white, but by outlaws in leather. And what began as a single act of repayment had become something far greater, proof that family is chosen, that promises matter, and that sometimes salvation arrives on 2 wheels with 113 engines roaring in the dark. The story didn't end that night. It never really ends, because every day, somewhere, someone is drowning, and every day, somewhere, someone decides to ride. That's the real miracle. Thank you for listening to this story. If it touched your heart, subscribe to our channel and share it with someone who needs to hear that help can come from the most unexpected places, because sometimes the angels we need wear leather instead of wings, and sometimes the prayers we whisper are answered by the thunder of engines rolling through the dark.